I'm Sora Alexin, and this is Magic Lesson number 78. Let's get anointed. I've already done a little bit on anointing oil, I believe, in an earlier video, but I had more questions, more detailed questions on it, and I just wanted to get this video out of the way before going back to the sigil videos that I've been preparing for everyone. What is anointing oil? Anointing oil is used in rituals or before rituals to prepare objects for ceremony by consecrating them. Like, for instance, the chrism oil placed on a baby's brow during, say, a Catholic baptism. That's meant to strengthen that child, the infant, the individual, the anointed one, against all forms of earthly evils and influence of such upon them. Knights get anointed, if you've heard of an anointed knight. What a lot of people understand the idea of a dubbing ceremony in some sense, when you're dubbed a knight and then receive that honorary title and the right to be called sir, bear arms inside of a church because you're a defender of God, all those different rights and responsibilities. But before the dubbing of a quote-unquote anointed knight, there was also an entire day or an entire evening of meditative reflection, usually within a church, and before that, a ceremonial bathing, which did and does involve using specific anointing oils. So at the end of that entire process, you would have an anointed knight. So Catholicism, you see it in the knighthood, it's magic everywhere, and it's not evil by any means. The Catholics actually use 3 different oils. They use chrism oil, catechumens, much like the word catechism, if you want to think about how to pronounce that and spell it, catechumens oil, and oil of the ailing, I believe, sometimes called oil of the sick, meant to anoint the sick. Chrism oil gets consecrated. Out of the 3, it's special by a bishop, and it's the only one that has balsam infused into it, and it gets the extra step of an air acknowledgement, spirit magic during its creation, during its blessing process, that breath of life. The other 2 are simply blessed, pure olive oils. Generally, anointing oils in high magic, in Western magic, if you're thinking of alchemy, hermeticism, those forms of the occult, most ceremonial magics, also in Haitian magics, in most Eastern magics, those anointing oils are not usually just pure grapeseed oil, pure flaxseed oil, pure safflower oil, or pure olive oil. They have that as a base, but they're also mixed according to very old recipes, and generally, I would say overall across all these cultures, contain more herbs and other very specific ingredients, along with detailed directions for their preparation, which could include timing, how long things are meant to infuse or refine, powder refinements before being added to the oils themselves, when to harvest the herbs being used, say by a full moonlight, only on a Tuesday, spell work to be done while blending, whether it's ritual chanting, prayer inside of a monastery for a full month, still all spell work. And then all of that is being infused into a pure oil. Generally in high magics, that's what we call an anointing oil. There are things like anointing powders as well, like footprint powder, Gigi powder. That's a whole nother subject. You can use oil to anoint yourself because, yes, you are a collection of waves manifesting on the material plane. You are relentless, eternal energy. One monad of it, just like all other material is, quote unquote material. We know it not to be, if we believe in rational science, solid at all. So at least the vessel you inhabit is manifested here on a physical plane made of energy. And so anointing the self, the vessel, before and during magic rituals is pretty common as a cleansing rite or a preparation rite. Also, again, anointing of sacred objects used in spell work or ceremonial magic, like athames, the ritual blade you find a lot in Wicca, like Alexandrian Wicca and Gerardian Wicca, or candles. It's very, very common to anoint candles. Inside of religion, inside of magic, you'll see it done across the board. I know of magicians who anoint their saltpeter containers, their amulets, the altars they use, especially if they use stone altars. Some sacred spaces receive an anointing after a ritual cleansing or a ritual banishing, usually in the four corners of the watchtowers and then the center of a space. Thresholds can be anointed with oil, energetic symbols, yes, including sigils. If you do sigil magic and you're looking for a boost, you can anoint sigils with anointing oils. Generally, that's done to the papyrus or whatever medium you're choosing to use before the charging phase of your sigil work or perhaps of your chaos magics. Anointing oils are most often used in conjunction with other spells, other symbols, other sigils, other items, and they're a way to purify any form of spelling. Sigils, after all, are a very purified form of spelling. So adding anointing oil to your sigillarium work is never a bad idea. I even know of a very famous hallway that receives an anointing. Many, many tourists pass through this hallway in France, and it receives a weekly ritual oil anointing on a specific tile within the floor to empower the area, that hallway, against taking on negative vibrations over time. Because the hall contains certain artifacts, especially 3 specific paintings, where the paintings, of course, you don't want to damage them or anoint the paintings directly. And the handlers know that those specific artifacts tend to attract and retain negative influences over time. So in an effort to protect the public, the space itself, and of course, these incredible works, a tile in the hall is anointed symbolically in place of anointing the artifacts themselves. So anointing the hall with the intention of empowering it against negative polarities and influences each week in the same place allows for a safer viewing of these objects, if you want to call it that, safer. My point being, whether it's a space, a sigil, a person, a candle, a familiar even, if done safely, I'm hard pressed to think of something that you couldn't anoint with anointing oil if you needed to, unless, of course, again, it's something you value that would be damaged in some way by doing so. Of course, don't ever do that, right? If it's something made of paper or of wood, it's going to take on a stain. If you're anointing yourself, it's usually going to be on the forehead in the symbolic placement of the third eye, the wrist, back or front, the back of the neck, and that little indentation at the base of the 7th cervical vertebra. Rosicrucians will know how important that one is. The wrists, again, the ankles, the back of the hands themselves. You'll see that, the powder anointment done on the back of the hands on Ash Wednesday, I believe, by Catholics as well. The bottoms of the feet, very important. Many Wiccan and pagan rites contain anointing the self or another on the forehead, lips, breast, belly, sex, and feet. Again, usually spoken with ritual words. The original commenter's question that began this video today for me, what is anointing oil? And then, can I buy any kind to use? Which is best? Like all magic, anointing oils move energy through the use of intended symbolism. So whether or not they work is going to depend on your personal level of magic and the intention and creation of the oil itself and how much energy has already been imbued into it. If you want to, say, add more energy to anointing oil like you would any ritual object, you can leave it in a place where you consistently do ritual work, say like on your altar, over a period of time. And then you're going to create a stronger, the egregore that you're accessing when doing the ritual work in that space is going to relay some of that energy into whatever powder or herb or amulet or relic or little tiny bottle of oil that you have on that altar. That's one way to further empower magical objects. And if you think about it, that's what a blessing on water in any religion, when we talk about holy waters or oil, talk about holy oils or anything is. The blessing, it's the words, thoughts, will, wave energy for the quantum, if you want to think about it as wave energy, if that helps you personally, if you're into rationalized science, if you've seen was it Morgue Officials Hyperion movie, for all those particulate scientists out there who understand the immaterial as based on non-atomic particle structure, that what you're doing is moving intentional energy through different waveforms to create a change by will. Ideas, thought forms, thought patterns, that's high vibrational energy, very high. Our bodies, say like our physical bones, that's a very low vibrational energy. So our thoughts have access to a higher vibrational schema. So when we think, when we intend, when we invoke by will to say good intentions onto or into through a medium of some kind, in this case, an oil that is being imbued with the intended purpose for the use of the practitioner, that's what's going on. So holy waters that are receiving a blessing, very much the same thing. Sanctifying anointing oils for magical use, very much the same thing. I suppose you could say when we call oil specifically quote unquote anointing, because there are many oils in magic, we are specifying the future intention to use it as an exterior application upon something or someone. It's going to be used to anoint rather than maybe inside of a potion, and then that label potion could involve perhaps ingestion or cooperation with other ingredients. So like with all magic, the symbolic is real. So if you take an anointing oil and apply it to, say, the back of your hands for greater dexterity and kinesthetic creativities, I don't know, maybe you're a painter. I was talking about paintings earlier, or a sculptor, or a weaver. What you're doing on one level, which is very real and always works, is intentionally sending the message into your subconscious that this effect will occur, that it is occurring. You're acknowledging that consciously so that your subconscious can take up that information. And when you do that, it does. That's one level of an anointing oil's use. That's manifestation reality. Whenever we do anything in ritual magic, we are hailing our subconscious, making a gesture to it, kind of waving it down, sending a message to the subconscious mind that we are imbuing whatever it is we intend directly into reality. That's how high magic, ceremonial magics, Western magics work. Symbolic gestures to the very impressionable subconscious mind that then manifest reality. You could say reality as it is projected and interpreted by our conscious conception and flawed sensory experience, but that's just really a more complicated elucidation of the exact same thing. What you think is, if you need proof of that statement, is the sound of my voice you're listening to real? Do you think it is? Then it is. Is that solid matter under your feet? Do you think it is? Then yes, it is solid matter. And no, that's not a silly or redundant concept for those with ears to hear. You are your thoughts. And remember, thoughts move at a very high vibrational frequency. Speaking of feet, symbolic anointing of oil on the feet, it's right there in the Talmud, in the Bible, in the Quran. An educated person might point out for further reflection, if you want to do research in those areas, that the anointing of the feet with oil and ritual is as old as the stars. Actually, it's as old as the recognition of the astrological star patterns associated with the human body, specifically as old as Pisces. So as long as Pisces has been around, that sign, which like cats is caught sort of half in this world and half somewhere else. I think of that Constantine, the Hollywood movie Constantine. There's a scene in the movie where he's placing his feet in a threshold element of water so that he can move between planes mentally, which is in fact reality. And he's holding a cat as one way to bypass some of the gatekeeping involved. And he says cats are good. They're half in, half out already. Like they're half already on a spiritual plane all the time. And Keanu Reeves' character is noting that sort of split partially spirit consciousness. Even though they're physically here, they're also not. That always makes me think of the astrological sign Pisces, which is very much the same thing. If you've been around someone who really acknowledges their sun sign being in Pisces, they're half here and they're half somewhere else. Half the time, just not on the planet as we think of it. They're not interacting here in reality. Half their mind is romping around the mystic while their bodies are here, where their ideas are floating way out there. Pisces is the sign associated with an automatic ascription to the subconscious and inner planes and other realms, much like that cat in the Constantine movie. And Pisces is also the zodiac associated with the feet, that door between the body and the path walked, the entry to mental spaces not usually mindfully recognized by the majority when we're moving through our reality mindlessly. So a ritual blessing, anointing the feet, giving symbolic access to the roads less traveled. If you're going to use a road opener or oil, you should be using it on your feet. That information gets passed down through the ages. That link to the information that's already in all of our subconscious understanding that we've been influenced by and conditioned by, and therefore, if we use it, is going to create very easy, powerful correspondences for us in our magics. It's right there. It's in the Bible. Ritual anointing of the feet with oil. And books like the Bible, the Talmud, the Quran, there are many. It's a part of that tradition that's passed on histories. So oil on the feet will show up there much like it showed up in the Dead Sea Scrolls. As for what you can buy, because that was part of the question, can I buy any kind to use, which is best? Buy whatever you want the correspondences of. Buy what you want to use for its effects. Anointing oil, as long as you don't get something baneful to splash all over yourself, don't do that. Or inadvertently dab on yourself, like some binding covenant oil, thinking that the label read convenience oil. I do know someone who did that, and trust me, your subconscious, it can read just fine, even if you are being consciously hasty and misread that label. Your subconscious does not. So always in magic, focus, dedication, detail. Read the label. The person I'm thinking of who did this, he bound himself to his car inadvertently, and it took weeks to figure out that he had done that and then dissolve the covenant binding he had placed on himself. His keys were the first thing he had touched after applying the wrong oil, the binding oil, and he couldn't figure out why he was so incredibly anxious for the next 2 weeks. Every time he had to leave his car parked somewhere or with a valet or on the street, every time he had to go away from his car, he felt very, very uneasy. And he didn't understand why he was forming this strange emotional fixation. And that was the reason. He had misread a label and he had bound a covenant to himself using covenant oil to his car. So it had to be dissolved. Oils are easy and powerful to use. That makes them fun, and you should try them and you should enjoy them. Make use of them in your spell work. But you also need to be aware of what you're using. And that doesn't mean they aren't safe and that you can't have great effect from them if you're using your real intentional magic. And also caring enough about what you're doing to pay attention to what you're doing so that you don't inadvertently allow the universe to enforce lessons on you that you might not enjoy the process of. Remember, we're always specific in magic. So veer away from trying to think of a label. If there was a label that read, quote, cleansing, purifying oil. No, don't buy that, don't use that unless you know how to specify those effects during that oil's use. If as you're using it, you know to say something along the lines of, to purify my intentions, to cleanse me of polarized forces, to cleanse and purify my spirit to align with the most best possible, highest version of myself. Wonderful, wonderful specificity. But you can't just toss purifying cleansing oil all over yourself or on a candle with no intention on your part and assume it's going to have whatever effect that you haven't particularly intended, because your subconscious is like a toddler without specific direction. It is going to have a play date. It is going to run around and smear chocolate all over its hands and face. It's going to assume that you must have meant something more like you want to purify and cleanse your digestive system. So I'll give you days of diarrhea until everything is out of your system, nice and clean. Is it cleansed? Is it purified? Sure. Are you also now incredibly dehydrated to where you made yourself ill and have to go be hooked up to an IV in an ER? Yes. But you did get purified in the process. So you see, if you don't specify in magic, remember, clarity, precision, power. Confusion, a lack of precision, you're just going to have a mess on your hands. That being said, for beginners, I would avoid things like luck oil, love oil, because seduction oil, that tells you all you need to know about, one, it's not going to work, or it's going to work in a way that's baneful. Can they work? And do they work when applied to ourselves, perhaps in dark magics? I don't want to say dark because there's no such thing really. Let's say baneful. Yes, unfortunately, they can work if they're used with awareness and intention, just like anything else. But I find that let me be more focused. I feel like I'm being a little scattered. Let's just focus on, say, luck oil. I find that with neophytes in particular, that there tends to be, especially early on in the magic evolutionary process, a very deep-seated subconscious belief where they can't get at that belief schema yet because they're just beginning the process of recognizing their conditioning and not even beginning to dissolve or nullify it yet. And part of that belief schema is usually a conditioned societal distrust in the word luck, quote unquote luck. So they go to buy a luck oil and it doesn't work. So no matter how much they use it, the stronger magic of their authentic mind nullifies it. The stronger magic of their genuine, powerful intention will always make it distrusted and then useless. If you understand magic, if you've worked with magic for a while, that isn't going to be a problem. That's the whole point of magic. But the word is so often conditioned into us in a harmful or useless way that it can take some real energy work beforehand, months or years of it, to reform that internalized schema of distrust in specific words and labels that we've been taught. The idea that good things happening to me without me doing any labor or work is impossible. Me getting lucky isn't a real thing. And that you have to unform those ideas before you can form new ones. So, only crazy people believe in that sort of thing. If at a very deep subconscious level, that's the real belief system in place, you can consciously use as much luck oil as you want. It's never going to have an effect. So again, that deep mindset, it's very pervasive, especially when you're beginning magical workings, when you haven't been doing it for a few years. It isn't that you're less powerful than any other magician. It isn't that you just started now and it's going to take so long for you to learn. It's just that we have all been conditioned from the moment of birth into specific societies that teach us things that we have to be able to expand our perspective beyond before we can unsee them. And if you think about it, the idea of luck not being a reality, that's ridiculous, really, as science acknowledges everything we interact with here, including ourselves, as a form of fundamental, laborless, lossless energy. So, of course, any sort of resource that you ever need is always at your fingertips and completely without any labor being involved. That's one way to redefine luck. Along with acknowledging the idea that your work week is called weak, which means not strong. Your weekend is called the end of your labor of 5 days, which means not strong. You're supposed to be working all the time, and it is drilled into you, even in how you think about time itself. That's a lot of unconditioning to work through. So just early on, maybe don't go buying luck oil. I would suggest, so that you can see and enjoy and feel your immediate power and progress, something more along the lines of a mindfulness oil, maybe, to touch to your temples each morning, or perhaps to the back of your wrists, much like women wear perfume or men wear cologne. Again, that's a grooming ritual and a magical ritual of itself that you could apply to your magical workings. But you could do that to impress on your subconscious with your mindfulness oil, just every morning, a little dab here and there, to come back to yourself more often in your chaotic, hectic workday. Because we often are very much involved in chaotic, hectic, dispersive cultures, which drag our mindfulness away. And to become very focused and powerful in our craft, mindfulness is a wonderful place to start. Start quickly and get powerful very quickly. So a beginner's internalized schema of reality is going to have also no reason to fight against a mindfulness oil the way it might fight against a luck oil, as I just explained. Because with the mindfulness oil, what you're doing is consciously, I put this oil on to remind myself to be mindful. There's nothing to fight there, even though it's also subconscious magic. Like when a person wears a symbol on a bracelet to constantly declare to themselves that that symbol has a meaning and influence on them, so they visually see it throughout the day and then it has that influence. Same thing. Most people don't automatically distrust that concept. It just seems like common sense. That if you wear a symbol on your wrist on a bracelet and it visually corresponds to something for you, it's going to remind you of that throughout your day. And that's because we're already conditioned to accept and believe and understand that yes, that's just rational. That's just a symbol of understanding of how a symbol works. So, in the very same way as looking at this thing makes me think of this thing, yes, same idea. Putting this anointing oil on to be mindful, it makes me think about the fact that I decided to buy this oil. That was intentional. I decided to wear this oil. I decided to make a ritual of this process to improve or better myself in some way that I'm choosing for myself. It makes me mindful of being mindful. And like most of the most significant energetic magics that are the easiest to produce, perceive, and empower, it's an immediate harmonic circle. It's a resonating rhythm. It's a self-affirming construct. I'm putting on mindfulness oil to remind myself to be mindful through my day. That's powerful magic. And when you're starting, much easier than I'm putting on luck oil, even though I don't really believe in luck, to see if I become lucky. Candle anointing oil is great for anyone too, and it's less risky for someone who might be worried about self-anointing, who might be worried that they're not being specific enough. They might not have worked through releasing a lot of their vague anxieties, and they're like, I don't want to do magic to myself directly. What if I mess up and do something horrible? So you can choose the oil that calls out to you and corresponds to your needs, and then anoint a candle with it for its intended effects. That way, it's only when the candle is lit that it's having those effects. So if there's any bad fallout, if you feel like you weren't specific enough, if you haven't worked through your own fears and anxieties, don't light the candle, And it's much easier to remove. Also, at the same time, every time you light that candle, which is a very simple and powerful ritual, you're going to be adding power to that reservoir of energetic intention. Maybe it was creativity oil. Maybe it was kindness oil. Maybe it was friendship oil. Whether you consciously remember it or not, that oil was anointed on a candle. You did it months ago, and now you're lighting the candle, and it's burning for hours and hours over a period of half a year. In fact, like all magic, it's going to be best when you forget about it consciously, when you aren't focused consciously on the fact that that candle on your shelf out of 5 was anointed for a specific effect. That's when it's going to work best. If you're doing ceremonial magics alone, maybe as a formal but lone practitioner, private practitioner, maybe Golden Dawn, maybe home practitioner, Rosicrucian, don't live near a temple, maybe Mother of Isis, roof correspondent courses, or perhaps from ancient grimoire texts or other texts that you're working from to do privatized and yet daily formal magics. You should have already learned the steps via whatever background, mentioned or unmentioned, that you're working from to anoint your ceremonial tools correctly. You're going to find it in every tradition, and it's there for a reason. Don't ignore it. I think I've gone over anointing oil for that purpose in ritual tools in a video. You could listen to that for reference if you really have no other place to begin. But you should definitely be consecrating the tools of your craft, including altar candles, if you are practicing formal magics. I would say if you're going to buy anointing oils, be sure of the ingredients, or be sure of the authenticity or trust that you have in the oil's maker, their honesty in their products. Don't go assuming something's safe to put on your skin ever for any reason. Always do a rash test. I don't care if it's shampoo or anointing oil from the third Magi right outside of the doors of Jerusalem. Be careful whose products you use when you're putting things on your skin. It should be a magician that you trust, or a witch that you trust, or a wizard that you trust, or a sage that you trust, or a bruja that you trust, right? It should be someone you trust, both for the potency of whatever the materials are and for the potency of the magic, which are a part of the ritual oil's creation that's given to them by their creator. And also because if there is any sense of distrust in you or in them, you're going to have problems, because in a sense, it is a shared magic. If they don't have the power to intentionally bless the oil, or if you do not trust them to have that power or to not have pure intentive focus that you've both agreed to, it's not going to work very well. And when it comes to magical practitioners you can trust, very often that person best for the job is you. And yes, you can make and consecrate your own anointing oils, and you should be. Gather the ingredients, do the research, do the ceremony, and make your own. The potency of the magic will depend entirely on your potency as a magical practitioner. And again, as I said, you could leave it on your altar in your sacred space, in a space that's sacred to you for long periods of time, so that it would become more powerful. And there is no better way to increase your magic prowess than by doing the legwork yourself, lifting the weights, doing the ceremonies yourself, making the oils yourself, over and over and over, until you know your magic does work, has increased, and is honed into a finely wedded tool. If you haven't tried oils yet, do have fun with them. Give it a shot. Start with a candle if you're worried about it. If you don't like it, get rid of the candle. You can find oils everywhere, all over to purchase. If you don't want to make them yourself, or perhaps you can't find the ingredients to make your own, maybe you're heavily involved in temple magics where you don't have the time to make your own. My shop on Etsy has some oils, but not very often. I only make the oils I make when requested to specifically by other practitioners who need the specific ones that I make. And then they show up in my shop when I've happened to go through the 6-month or 13th month process of creating them, and there is some extra volume left, which I decide to make available to the public. So I wouldn't depend on my oils. I think they're wonderful, but if you're going to need something to use over and over again, mine aren't always available. I suppose that's the most appropriate way to say that. But I do want to mention Etsy again, because when it comes to just a glut of actual, authentic, handmade, which we know is important in the occult, Wiccan, pagan, magical, beautiful, incredible merchandise all in one place, Etsy's that place. Not Amazon as much, not Facebook, not Instagram boutiques. For handmade occult items that you can pretty easily vet the creators of, or have conversations with the shopkeepers that are making them. If you don't happen to personally be networked deeply into a dark academia franchise in Europe of colleagues who are going to give you a reference for entry into the hidden shop above the catacombs that still produces Abermillion the Mage's oil with true calamus for shipping, right? If you don't have that in your life, Etsy is the next best thing. It's like where every magical storefront of actual handmade occult items goes to breed. It's Diagon Alley. You can find true Zen Buddhist monks willing to make you, prayer beads by hand. So it's an infinite window display of all things occult. So I'd suggest going there. Go to Etsy and then do your homework. Plug in anointing oil and any keyword, you're going to find dozens of options. Maybe avoid the obvious snake oil salesman. Any shop that has 9 kinds of get rich oil or make them love you junk, that probably isn't anything you want to be involved in or patronizing. Don't feed egregores of energy that focus on the wrong things unless you want those egregores of energy to backfeed into your life. And just don't work, because then you're going to endlessly be paying into an egregore of energy that's never going to have an effect, because they weren't real and had no real intentions behind them. Remember, if your subconscious doesn't think something's valid, it isn't and it won't be. that applies to anointing oil the way it applies to all high magic. Be well in your great works. Until next time.